Matthew, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, she said today that the only ones to blame for these crimes are the individuals who committed them, and not at all the president, as some people in the country suggest. She also said that nobody should blame Bernie Sanders, for example, for the shooting of Congressman Steve Scalise. Is it a fair equation?
Well, it's not fair to point the blame at any one person, especially when political polarization has been continuing in this country for over 30 years. I don't think Donald Trump can reach that far back into the past. For decades, we've seen every year, this is the most brutal campaign. I mean, look at the headlines from 2008, 2012. We always thought things were getting more polarized. It's been going on for a long time. Trump might crystallize it, and he might embody it in ways that other politicians don't, but he's certainly not the cause of this rift.
I would agree with you on that, but Matthew, do you think it's appropriate for the president, in the wake of the pipe bombs that were mailed to CNN, in the wake of the horrific attacks in a synagogue this weekend, to come out on this Monday and say that the media is the true enemy of the American people? The media, what does the media have to do with this violence?
Well, I share the question mark with what you're saying. It does seem odd. The media clearly has nothing to do with the violence, although the media might play a part in not understanding how the political feelings of people in this country are developing. Most people still aren't extremely on one end of the side of the other. In fact, most people tend to, have some ideas that can be identified as conservative and some that could be identified as more liberal. And instead of speaking to the vast majority of people, if we continue to have a polarizing rhetoric, we can drive the problem worse, instead of embracing the fact that more Americans than we might think might have some libertarian sensibilities.
But Sanford, let me ask it this way about the media. Maybe it is the president's harsh rhetoric, but combined with what people see, the discourse, the political debate that people watch on media screens, maybe the president's rhetoric is what giving them a gun, these people. I'm just trying to use a metaphor, but the bullets come from the political discourse they watch online or on screens.
No, I think you're absolutely right. The president is the president of the United States. One of his primary responsibilities is to stand for the country as a whole, to unite us, to bring us together. Instead, Donald Trump, especially given how much he's influenced by Steve Bannon, is consciously trying to be the divider in chief. His political strategy is to polarize us and pull us apart so that people have to choose whether they're going to be with him or not, regardless of the consequences. And it's a very diabolical, dangerous, irresponsible, self-serving political strategy.
But isn't that strategy available to him in part because of the media? I'm not saying that it's the right strategy, but look, when people look up and they've lost faith in institutions, and they look up at the major cable networks who are spending 24/7 talking and speculating about Donald Trump and pushing out any other news around the world, or a lot of other news in the United States, why shouldn't people be infuriated at media as an institution?
Trump is winning. He's demonizing the press and deflecting attention away from their efforts to highlight his profligate lying and his irresponsible inflaming of incendiary rhetoric. And the fact of the matter is, I think, to the extent that the press is complicit, it's this failure to actually call him out for doing this, acting totally out of norms of conventional liberal democratic practices in a way that threatens the viability of our very political system. And this, both sides do it. We have to be fair and balanced. Kind of rhetoric that the press historically is too vulnerable to participating in is its big failing.
But Matthew, do you think that it might be the reaction to what the president is saying from politicians, from people in the subway, from the media, that's generating the very inflammatory, dangerous situation that we have?
What I see most often that Trump does is react, and he does react in an extremely aggressive way. But I think that the polarization and the divide that we see is really the result of the fact that, I mean, yes, it's as the other guest was saying, this is unlike what we experienced in the past, but we've also had a government unlike what we've experienced in the past over the past several decades, where we federalize everything and we try to govern this country as if it's as if it was one massive state. So as we try to federalize and collectivize everybody, we realize that there's more differences at stake, and that perhaps, making such broad and large policy decisions for, at once for the entire country is the real problem here. And that happened under a Democratic administration, and it is also happening under a Republican administration. As they take the same power grabs, you find that there's a rift in people. One approach doesn't work for everybody, and that's why we were designed to have more effective local governments.
Sanford, I saw you shaking your head.
Well, it's simply not true. The federal government's smaller now proportionately than it was 30 years ago. We're hollowing out the welfare state. We're retrenching. The federal government has a much smaller presence. Even under Democrats like Obama and Clinton, we shrunk the size of the deficit. We're pulling back. We're living through a profoundly conservative era that Trump is doubling down on.
Sanford Schramm and Matthew Larosiere.